Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The Untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing games are missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, we got a special guest in the building today. Y'all know him.
I keep trying to touch the untouchable through the webcam.
But we got my main man, 50 grand, the guy called the Dundada of boxing media. Fight Hype's very own, Sean Zittel. What's good, Sean?
What's good, man? I am live from Tahoe, Nevada. I've been, or California, state line, and I have been enjoying very much up here in Tahoe, California, Nevada, whatever you want to call it. And it's been a good time. It's been a good time with the family up here, hitting the lakes, out in the sun, walking around, eating good food, and enjoying myself, man. So
yeah,
it's awesome to be caught up with you, my friend. It's always great to see you, BT.
Absolutely, man. We go way back. For those that don't know, me and Sean, we go back some years. Back to when Sean was on the Boxing Voice. So, I don't think we've ever gone live like this before. I know I've interviewed you, but I don't think we've ever done a live like this. I know you've been live on a couple other channels, but never on True School. So
no, and as I understand it, I'm not from the high tech, illustrious studios in Las Vegas. That people are used to seeing me on in the lives now. And I believe your setup isn't the same as it.
No, I'm not in the friendly confines of the True School Sports Studio either. So we're both kind of just playing it by ear. But we have a lot to discuss. I mean, a lot of people have asked us in the past, when is Sean and BT gonna do the podcast together? When are y'all gonna do that? So now, I guess you guys can get a taste of what that would be like. Rough draft.
It's a rough draft. This is like Mean Streets to Goodfellas and Casino.
Yeah.
Scorsese's just starting out.
This is like back in the day on PS2 when you had like WWE SmackDown. Here Comes the Pain, but before they had the SmackDown versus Raw.
No. Here Comes the Pain is the Goodfellas and the Casino in that one. That's so like SmackDown Just Bring It, and then to the rough draft to SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. But no, I'm sorry. A lot of people would probably agree with you.
Yeah, no. I thought SmackDown Here Comes the Pain was the best game ever, but I'm just saying like you get the gist what I'm saying.
I totally.
But Sean, listen, I know you've been out enjoying your vacation, but we brought you here for the boxing, man. Lots been made of like Crawford and Spence. I know you were right there in the field as always covering the fight. So just what were your initial thoughts on just how everything played out? Like how did you interpret how Crawford and Spence played out?
Well, I don't think anyone – I know you picked – well, I guess everyone except you who picked Crawford by 9th round technical knockout, and you said it was one of the easiest fights to pick that you ever picked. So I guess everyone but you.
Yeah.
Actually, shout out to Ron, who I covered the fights with.
Mm-hmm.
It was around – well, I apologize, Ron. I won't do it again if you don't want it to be known like that. But, he was at the media day just looking at both fighters in the workout, and he too said, I wouldn't be surprised if this actually turns out in a one-sided fight for Crawford, because he was excited with that. But I just say that to give you two your props. But I did pick Crawford to win by stoppage, and I picked him because of his counterpunching. But and he was the favorite by the Las Vegas bookies, by most of the boxing experts and fighters and trainers were picking Crawford. But it was expected by very few, all but two, I guess, that would happen. Even the people like me who picked him by stoppage, I expected Errol Spence to get off to a good start in that fight, because Crawford usually has to take his time to adjust to the other fighter, get a beat on them and start to get his counterpunching in. And then usually he starts off orthodox and then turns southpaw, but he starts southpaw right away.
Yeah.
And what was a little surprising was how well he out-jabbed Errol Spence in round one. He out-jabbed Errol Spence in round one, and then how early he got to him and dropping him in round two. Basically just how easy it was for Crawford. And then what was a little surprising for me was how sharp and on point Crawford looked. He looked 25 years old and not 35 years old. He was beginning to get, he turns 36 in September. He was beginning to get hit a little bit more against, Kaviaskas, Jose Benavidez some years back. Kell Brook was out jabbing him early in their fight back in the bubble. Avanesian landed a sweeping right hand on him in the first round. So, he was getting touched up a bit more, and his legs to me were starting to slow down a little bit. But then, man, it kind of reminded me of Floyd Mayweather against Canelo Alvarez, where Floyd, his legs started to look a little bit flat early in the 2010s in certain fights like Mosley. And then Miguel Cotto touched him up a little bit. And then Robert Guerrero, he found his legs. He was up on his toes for the first time in a couple of years after kind of being more planted and stepping two guys. But then against Canelo, it all came together, and he had, I think, one of the top three performances, the other two being Gotti and Corrales, of his career. And so Crawford, he found, I don't want to say found the, found the fountain of youth a little bit, but he really tightened it up. And I hadn't seen that was the best he's looked since the Jeff Horn days. And instead of being, like Leonard Hearns, it was like you said, and I said,
Mayweather Gotti.
It wound up being like a Mayweather Gotti performance, which was, incredible by Crawford because, Errol Spence is considered so much higher than Arturo Gotti ever was, especially at welterweight. I mean, Gotti never became a champion at welterweight, but so yeah. But
what was there any
performance by Crawford?
Was there any surprise that he spent the whole fight in the southpaw stance? And I also ask, do you think maybe spending all that time around Shakur Stevenson influenced him maybe to stay in that southpaw stance?
I hadn't thought about that.
Because I was thinking about that because he kind of like a welterweight in some cases, like a Shakur Stevenson in some parts of that fight.
He did Stevenson, like Shakur's borrowed so much from Andre and Terence and Floyd and guys like that, right? That came before him that he looked up to. Maybe one of the OGs and Terence took something from Shakur, because you're right, that southpaw jab was dominant. It wasn't a setup jab. Crawford's always had a good jab out of both stances, but he's never been a jabber. Errol Spence was considered the jabber. And like guys like De La Hoya and Cuarte are considered jabbers. It's a real primary weapon, whereas Crawford, his primary weapon is setting up his power shots off counter punching and killing you in the exchanges, and sometimes getting the angle off the double jab, taking something off of it twice to set up something behind it. But yeah, the way he was jabbing, now that you mention it, was a little bit out of the page of Shakur Stevenson. Like, guys like Shakur and Purnell were dominant jabbers out of the southpaw stance. And he kind of did do that. And I was surprised, again, that he fought the whole fight southpaw, not only because he fights a lot of the first couple rounds orthodox when he in his career, but also because when I was watching tape and I saw the way he cleaned up Kaviaskis in their fight and dropped him off, I think it was 3 or 4 consecutive straight right hands in the orthodox stance, I thought to myself, the right hand is usually the southpaw killer for an orthodox fighter. That's the shot you got to get going against the southpaw, is the right hand. So I thought maybe Terence would look to be orthodox and land that right hand down the center against Spence as a southpaw. But like you said, maybe he took a page from the younger guy, the younger fighter, and he had a dominant southpaw jab like Shakur likes to do, because that's more out of Shakur's book. That's a great point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, if you guys have any questions for Sean, he's gonna be here for like maybe an hour or so feel free to drop them down below. My man QT says right here, he said that southpaw because he was southpaw because they had been watching film on Earl, and maybe they looked at Earl's Olympic tape. Yeah, I know they had the one fight. He had the one fight with the Kazakh fighter. I can't remember his name, but there was one fight that everyone kept talking about. He fought a Kazakh fighter who was a southpaw, and that guy gave Earl some problems.
Who was a southpaw? I remember we watched that tape years ago in Vegas when you would come by Vegas years ago before the pandemic. Who was the southpaw, the tall southpaw? I think he was a Latin fighter that may have hurt him early in his career too.
Emmanuel Larte, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. It was a tall guy. And
there was I don't know if the guy you're referring to was a southpaw, but maybe Alejandro Barrera.
Yeah, it was one of those guys. It was I know it was a Latin American fighter, and he was a tall southpaw. But
yeah, okay. Well, Sean, I know one thing. I know one point you try to drive home in all your interviews, like when you were there with Crawford and Spence in the flesh, and you asked them questions. I know one thing that you were very big on, probably more than anybody I know in the media, was the counter punching. Terence Crawford counter punching. From what you thought of all these years, from the counter punching standpoint, to what played out in the ring, like how accurate was it? You feel
extremely accurate. I mean, to a level even that surprised me in terms of how early in the fight, because I thought the counter puncher would have to take some time to adjust to the offense. He'd have to take some time to take a look at what he's getting at, gauge the timing, get used to the power, get comfortable with the power. So you're standing in range consistently to make the guy pay after you make a miss by a little bit, and you're not up on your feet too much early on. I thought Crawford would have to use his feet more early on, but he was so comfortable with the power. But I just think Crawford's one of the best counter punchers ever. And it was fun to talk to Jim Lampley about it afterwards, who always emphasized, like Juan Manuel Marquez's counterpunching, Floyd's counterpunching, Roy's counterpunching. He always got it. Jim Lampley, extremely high boxing IQ, being the great blow-by-blow guy he was for HBO all those years. And, Jim, I think in another interview said that the counterpuncher is always going to be the aggressive fighter at the highest level. And that's basically a variation of what Gene Tunney said after he beat Jack Dempsey, like 100 years ago. He's talking about the great boxer always licks the great puncher at the highest level. And it's because counterpunching is really special, sophisticated stuff in boxing. And it's not a coincidence that Muhammad Ali, Roy Jones, Floyd Mayweather, Pernell Whitaker, and even guys we consider aggressive like Roberto Duran and Canelo Alvarez, even guys like Pacquiao. Pacquiao hurt Mayweather. It may have been on both times with the left hand in the fourth and the sixth. Really is only 2 moments in the fight. But I think he landed both on a counterpunch. Right. The only time he was – and so counterpunching is a part of the highest level of the sport, and of the craft of boxing, So if you can't counterpunch, you and the other guy can, that's quite the event. James Toney, and on and on and on and on and on. It's such a sophisticated high-level skill in boxing, an elite-level skill. You're seldom going to find an all-time great that can't counterpunch. Salvador Sanchez was a boxer puncher in and out.
Mexican goat. That's the Mexican goat right there.
In those, right, and on and on. But what's special about Crawford is he's an offensive counterpuncher. And guys like Floyd, once they got to 47, were more, I guess, lack of better way of putting it, defensive counterpunchers.
Safety first counterpunchers.
More single shot counterpunchers.
Yeah. Slow
the pace down and make it to where I just got to land 2 or 3 or 4 of these straight right hands or these check left hooks and make him miss everything.
Yeah.
And Floyd, to his credit, punched harder than people give him credit for, so that would tame him. A lot of people know this stuff. But what makes Crawford special is he's an offensive counterpuncher.
An aggressive counterpuncher.
Right.
Yeah.
He's trying to initiate the exchange and punctuate the exchange with his counters. And he can initiate it with his great jab or take something off of it, double it up, and then punctuate. He's the best at punctuating exchanges, which you can only do by being a great counterpuncher, by countering the other guy's final shots. And I talked about this on my stream, but what's crazy is I would talk to you about this. Yeah. I would always, in a way, liken him to Juan Manuel Marquez.
That's right. For years, you talked about
like,
that.
What do you mean? One guy's a long brother, who's faster, and Terence Crawford, and the other guy's, a great Mexican counterpuncher, and has shorter arms, and comes from 126 as opposed to 35, and it's like where they have the similarity is that sometimes they more often than not in the Errol Spence fight, but more often than not, they start slow and they're offensive counterpunchers. They're not looking to put together 1 or 2. They're looking to put together combinations and ultimately finish the fight by knockout. That's how they want to get down. And it so turned out that I talked to Esau Diegas,
great trainer. Yep.
Right. Who's Bomac's right-hand man. And Esau Diegas is telling me, the guy I studied the most was Juan Manuel Marquez. And ever since Terence was a teenager, I've been working on the counters with the way I hold the mitts for him. And the movements we're mostly taking from is Juan Manuel Marquez. And so a couple weeks before the fight between Spence and Crawford, Esau saw Marquez at fights in Mexico. It may have been, I think it was down in Mexico. And Esau was talking to him. And Marquez told him how much he loves Crawford and gives him the salute as a counterpuncher. So, yeah, he's an all-time great counterpuncher and a offensive counterpuncher at that.
Yeah, so everything kind of lines up now. There's